I'm pretty good.
Live.
Daniel? Yeah.
Hi.
How are you guys?
Good, mate. Good. Just plotting along, working away.
Plotting
How are you
along.
going?
Good. We're just answering some questions today. We haven't done this for a while. We did a live business Q&A a few months ago, and people seem to like it on a Friday, Arvo. So we thought, well, why not just jump live again? If you're hearing this on Sunday, and our usual Sunday afternoon session, good Sunday to you. We're recording this on Friday, so it's a bit of a time warp. What have you guys been working on lately? Like, what's news in grey space land?
We've been doing, well, Dane and I, two different things. I've been focusing a lot on just some marketing things and trying to explore some new avenues and just learn more about all the different types of marketing, because there's so much to it. So that's been my main focus. Dan, what have you been
Yeah,
up to?
I've just been trying to make sure things are getting done. We're ticking and getting money into the account to keep doing what we're doing, more or less. Big influx of clients lately, which has been fantastic. So just making sure everyone's done on time, all lodgements are getting hit. Just working through the 23 accounts.
I feel like you two are probably the more chilled out accountants I've ever seen during tax time. I've got to admit, like for this quarter, you guys are easily the most relaxed I've ever seen an accountant to be.
If you see a photo of us maybe 3 years ago, I don't know, you'd see a lot more hair for both of us, I think, to be honest. So I don't know how true that is. Lucky's Daniel, who's 6 foot. Daniel's lucky he's 6 foot.
No one can tell. No one can tell. Just brush it over. It's good enough. No one sees you from a downward angle.
What about yourself, Owen? What's been happening at the Rask group?
Oh, there's a lot going behind the scenes. I've been pretty frantic. As you guys know, we've all been on the road as well for the road shows. We've got a couple more to go. The big ones in Newcastle and Sydney are still yet to come. Newcastle this coming week. So, folks, if you haven't got your ticket, get your ticket to Newcastle. And in Sydney at the end of the month, which will be massive. So, just been working on that. I've got a lot of things going on behind the scenes. We've met a few new hires.
Awesome.
And I was just telling you guys, like, it's a really interesting time in the finance industry at the moment and most industries, because I think there's a lot of pressure at the moment on businesses. I don't know. I reckon we're kind of preaching to the choir, but I think there's a lot of businesses that will probably start to struggle if they're not already, because I've seen in my industry, and the finance industry is notorious for being quite cyclical in employment habits, because it tends to be forward looking. Like the finance industry tends to hire and fire pretty quickly ahead of the curve. And I've seen a lot of that happening lately for various reasons. And so I don't know if that's a sign of other things to come. I don't know if you guys have seen this in your business. Like, has there been any kind of rhyme or reason with your clients over the last, say, year or two?
Yeah, things after COVID, and there was all of that money injected from the state government and federal as well. Everything was great in terms of business and cash flow, but now, and I think everything sort of works in a cycle where interest rates have gone up, so people are feeling the crunch at home, and in turn the rent's gone up. So whether you're renting or you own your own property, your free cash flow budget has become a lot less. And I think people are now becoming much more price sensitive when making purchase decisions, and just tightening that budget across the board, whether that's going out and I guess spending money out on dinners or whatever it is, or if you need repairs done around the house, you're much more price sensitive with your buying decisions. It's not just, oh, that's the price, yep, done. What we're seeing now, especially in the trade space, is people are getting 3 or 4 quotes before going ahead with a job. And I think that's with anything. So people are much more price sensitive now.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed this across our whole marketing spectrum at Rask. Like everyone is a bit more discerning. There's definitely less, like you can measure this, right? As a business owner, you should be measuring these things where you look at like conversion rates, you look at even just engagement rates. If you're producing digital content, or if you run a physical event, you know how many people you should normally expect in the room. You can kind of use these to your advantage, and definitely seeing some weakness there. But we are going to answer some questions about now. And it's really important to understand that even if we do talk about things like they're tax related, or if we do talk about things and they're financial related, it's really important you get expert advice. Daniel and Jordan here are qualified tax accountants, so they can give tax advice. You can book in a call with those guys. There's a link in the show notes that goes to the Grayspace website. Reach out to them. They're also on Twitter, which we just discovered should be referred to as X, Twitter/X. But yeah, and you can obviously, we can only limit our comments to general wisdom in this chat, because we just simply don't know the intricacies of everything. If you do have a question and you are watching live, we're thinking that we might like to try and do these more often. So if this time slot of Friday at lunchtime works for you, we know the business owner calendar is pretty tight, but if it works for you, for sure, just let us know in the comments. You can even drop a question in live here in the chat, whether on YouTube or Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever you're getting this. Guys, the first question came from Monique Media. Now, I've got to admit, I made this one up. So, and I used Monique, who's our new boss. Who is our new boss?
Yes, she is the new boss.
She's the new boss of the Australian Business Podcast. She's going to whip us into gear. And so she would appreciate me saying this. But this was a question that I did ask you on the road shows. And I think it got a lot of attention because a lot of people in the rooms, a lot of the people that follow us are side hustlers more so than full-time business owners. So they have something that they do on the side, which is profitable. But I'm curious to put it to the both of you, like you see maybe hundreds of different clients a year, right? What are the most profitable side hustles that you have ever seen? It might not even be right now, but just generally speaking, what have been the most profitable? Whoever wants to answer that, or tit for tat, whatever.
Yeah, I'm happy to start it off because we do see quite a bit of it sort of come through. And like anything, I don't want to like isolate one sort of thing that someone does that's sort of really, really profitable. I've sort of grouped it together a little bit so it sort of impacts more people. It's people that use the current skill set that they have with their employment and then have found a way to be able to generate additional income using the same skill set on the side. So I think the one that sort of made the most money sort of that we seen was actually a Sparky. It was an electrician, and all he was doing was just basic, really, really basic things on the side. Sort of just whether it's changing light bulbs, doing a few little, running some cable, adding some power points here and there for starter off his family and friends. And as that sort of picks up, the little jobs, he's been able to just make, honestly, a really, really good amount of money on the side. Usually what some people make as a full-time job.
So we're talking like thousands of dollars a month.
Yeah. Really, really easy because
like the good thing about that, sorry, DJ, the good thing about that is like you're already utilizing a skill set that you have.
Yeah.
So there's no downtime for learning a new skill. So I think like that's in terms of time and value in time, that's a huge benefit. You don't have to go out there, research and completely learn a new skill end to end. You've already, in that example, done your trade certificate. You've got the skill set. It's just getting clients.
Yeah. And there's so many sort of softwares and sort of marketplaces out there available to do that as well. So, for tradies like High Pages, then you've got, Fiverrs or Upwork, Airtasker. You don't really need to even sort of go door knocking anymore. There's a marketplace for it. You post your skill set up and people will more or less start knocking on the advertisement. Like the barrier to entry is very, very low. There's no costs involved. You don't need any additional courses. You're more or less good to go from that onset. Because there's no expenses involved, it's pure profit.
Yeah.
It's just your time.
Yeah, it's great. It's like those consulting businesses anywhere that you can do that. Some white collar businesses, like say if you're an architect or something like that, there might be non-competes and that sort of stuff, which you might need to be mindful of. But
circumstantial this is generic as all hell. But
yeah, absolutely. No, but that's a good point. Like a lot of people that are listening to this probably have a skill set that they could adopt outside of work. Whether you're, quote unquote white or blue collar, meaning that you're on the tools or you're in the office. So that's a really good one, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's that kind of like old trapeze thing that Scott Pate from the Barefoot Investor used to talk about, where you don't let go of one trapeze until you've got your hand on the next one. And so if you are wanting to run your own business as a Sparky or a plumber or a carpenter, you've got the beautiful benefit of being able to slowly carve into the time that you would normally reserve for your full-time job by doing more and more as a side hustle while you get that confidence. That's a good one. Do you have any others?
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, maybe not the most profitable because there is that time investment to learn the new skill. But if you have a hobby and you're really enjoying that hobby and you think there's some way to monetize that, whether it's photography, video, editing, or whatever it may be, use that time that you have to learn the skill. And then once you've mastered it, that's when you can go and try and acquire clients. And again, there's several marketplaces where you can advertise yourself and just build a portfolio. And then you can just go out to businesses and pitch yourself, which is always the hardest thing. It's never the skill set itself. It's doing the sales side of thing where you're going out there. This is me. I'm fantastic. No one loves to do that.
Yeah. There's a good comment from Marco, which I'll get to in a sec. And it's true. Like even Monique, who works for us, just mentioned her. She does a lot of that. Like you guys know, she does all of our video editing, all that sort of stuff, and production stuff. But she does that 5 to 9 as well. Like it's not just her 9 to 5, and she loves it because it gets her free tickets to like gigs and events that she wants to go to, and she just takes photos and stuff. So she kind of saves money and makes money at the same time, which is really cool. And she has fun doing it. Yeah. If neither of you have anything else to go on, I might jump to the next question. Is that cool?
Let's do it.
Because this one is exactly the same, well, not exactly the same, but very close to what Marco just wrote in live. And the question that we got sent was, I'm thinking of starting a small biz on the side or focusing on my career. How do you know if you're better off after tax if you should do one or the other? That is, whether you go and you start a business on the side, like a side hustle, or you have a small business, or if you focus on your career. And this relates to Marco's comment. It just said, just ask your boss for overtime. Most employers will be happy to get more work out the door. Might have to settle for ordinary rate where you are on a decent pay. That's a good one, Marco. Thank you, mate. So I guess the question is there, like there is tension, right? Between starting a business on the side or even just going into a fully fledged business yourself versus just investing in yourself and getting a pay rise. And what I might say, just to push back a little bit on what you said before, Jordan, is that if you do the hobby as a job, just be sure you know why you're doing it. So what I mean by that is, like, if it's something that you love, turning it into a monetizable thing can actually mean that you don't love it as much. So just be mindful of that barrier if you cross that or you go through that. But just generally speaking, how do we know if it's worth? Is there, I mean, there's probably no golden formula here, but what do you guys think?
I think the first thing just on this question specifically is don't even think about the tax component. It's more so what you want to do and what you want to get out of your career or a business. If it's time or whatever it is, I wouldn't really think about tax. I'd leave that as an afterthought. So for me, making that decision whether to continue my career and upskill myself and get better at my career or start a side business, tax for me wouldn't be a consideration. It'd just be what I'm more passionate about.
No, I like it. Anything
It's
from
funny.
you?
We didn't even collaborate. I've got the exact same answer as Jordan. I literally wrote, tax should not be a consideration here at all, not even like a little bit. And just sort of using some basic numbers here. So whether you earn an extra $10,000 in sort of overtime, you get taxed, call it, you pocket $6,000 from your overtime, or whether you earn $10,000 from a side hustle as a sole trader, and then pay $4,000 of tax when you do your tax return at marginal rate at a later date, it doesn't change, right? So whether you've done the side hustle or whether you've done your overtime, the net result, generally speaking, does not change. So tax shouldn't be a consideration. It's not material. And the one thing I've got is focus on what you're passionate about. If you love your career and it sort of ticks all the right boxes for you, from passion project to making a difference, to paying the bills, to growth, to hitting your long-term goals, then you need to see what is going to, tick your boxes more or less. So what are you passionate about? What do you see yourself doing in 5 years' time? Is it growing through your career? Then you need to focus on your career. But if it's sort of like, oh, I'm just doing the career to pay the bills, it's not really what I'm passionate about, then start a side hustle and figure out the flow of money and start finding another flow of passion sort of from there. But I think the key thing that Jordan said to me is tax should not be considered here. It should be, what do you want to do long term?
Yeah, totally. Move the big rocks first. It's quite interesting because a lot of people that get to this point, I would say, just generally speaking, I would agree with both of what you said, but I would just maybe think about, first of all, what you've said. Then secondly, I would think about, where am I at in my career? So if you're still really junior in your career, you're probably going to make bigger strides really quickly by just getting better at your current job and getting that first or second promotion. That's probably, 20, 30, 40 grand over the next couple of years if you do it really well. Obviously, the data suggests that you should switch jobs and all that, but that's a risk in itself. So keep that in mind. But then it gets to a point where maybe people are 3, 4, 5 years in. They think, well, maybe I could do this myself. I'm pretty experienced. I'm feeling a bit more confident in what I know. In that instance, that's maybe then where you start to think outside of the career, I'd say, is like bigger picture. What can I achieve over the next 5 to 10 years? Or maybe there's not much headroom. There's no one here at my job that's probably looking like leaving. So maybe I can't get that extra job up. So just weigh that up at the time. And then I would cast my mind forward. If you're a young professional, say in your 20s, maybe late 20s, you're probably thinking about kids over the next few years. And if that's the case, you probably don't want to be starting a business when you have kids. We've seen some people do it. It's pretty scary unless you go about it right. Like I know, Daniel, you did it. Basically, you started the business first.
Yeah.
How did you? Okay, here's a question for you then. How did you weigh that up?
For me,
think about that?
Yes and no. Yes, I think Jordan and I both had a bit of naive arrogance to us, if you want to call it that. We've backed ourselves the whole time. At the end of the day, we're very passionate about what we do, and I think I could always see that it would work. I didn't see myself going backwards.
Yep.
So call it a bit of a punt, call it a bit of a, you know what, long story short, I wasn't happy with what I was doing. I had to make a change, and I like what I do, and I couldn't think of sort of any other way to do it rather than sort of just start working for myself realistically.
Is that because you could, as an accountant, you could basically port some of the customers that you already had, like they knew you and they would go with you, or is that not a thing?
No, so like we had a more or less talking to the top sort of point where we had a few people who were just sort of helping, like it was our skill set, so we were helping friends more than anything else. So the portfolio I had was like immaterial, like you could say nothing, it was that little. So no, well, and you know there's certain things in contracts where there's non-solicitation, we can't sort of take clients or anything like that. So
yeah, for sure,
we didn't have a client base moving across. I had a very understanding partner. I had Jordan, who was willing to come for the ride. And then we just sort of tackled winning clients as we went.
Yeah, fair enough. I like it. So I guess, I see this a lot, like a lot of young professionals and people who are switching careers. And people that are switching careers are probably the most at risk here because you do have to learn that new skill set that Jordan was talking about. So maybe the way to frame that is like get the experience first. We do have I had a lot of people come up to us at the events talking about this. Like, I want to go out on my own. I want to do this. I'm like, have you got the experience? Go and spend 6 months somewhere, you know?
Yeah, that's really important. You need to have that skill set. And especially if you're early on in your professional career, like if you're 2 or 3 years in, you still haven't mastered your craft yet. Like you haven't spent 10,000 hours doing what you need to do to be somewhat of an expert at that. And I think that's an issue with a lot of younger people and instant gratification where you want everything now, where when you're trying to learn a profession or learn a skill set, whatever it is, it takes time. You need to make mistakes and get better that way. And if you can make those mistakes on someone else's clock and get paid as you're going, that's fantastic.
Yeah, make the mistakes, de-risk it. So the next question was, this is more of a tradie specific question. I know you guys deal with a lot of trades, but someone wants to grow their business. What should they be thinking about? Like what platforms, how can they get that traction with new clients, more tradies, what you guys have seen that have worked? And even like Jordan, you've said recently that you've spent a bit of time focusing on this. And we are actually going to do a marketing kind of mini series here on the Australian Business Podcast.
Yeah.
But that'll be up in a few weeks. But what if there's a tradesperson out there listening to this thinking, well, how do I grow my business? Like what are some strategies that you've seen work?
Yeah,
Jordan, you're up. This is all you've been doing for the last couple of weeks. Show me.
Pressure. So I think if you're starting from the beginning, the first thing to do is sign up to a page like High Pages, a marketplace like High Pages, where you can advertise yourself. And I think you get 3 leads, or you get leads for jobs. I'm not sure how many it is, but you get leads, you advertise yourself, you go out there, quote it, whatever, and win the work, hopefully. But if you've already got a bit of a client base, the best return on sort of ad spend or marketing spend that we're seeing is with email marketing, because you've got a database already for 100 or 200 clients. It's really important, 1, that you're capturing that data correctly when you are getting new clients. And 2, once you do have that data, it allows you to send out email campaigns. So if you're a plumber, you can have seasonal emails to go out, check your hot water, or there's this new rebate. I know there's a rebate here in New South Wales I'm pretty sure it's for hot waters or whatever it may be, but revisit that market, your database, because it costs you nothing. I think MailChimp's free up to a certain amount of contacts. So that's a really easy one, cost you nothing. The other ones probably get a bit more expensive, where if you're looking at paid marketing, so if you're looking at Facebook, Instagram ads, Google ads are very expensive and they're very competitive, especially Google can be very competitive. If you're comfortable with it, another way to generate work is to just go out to businesses and introduce yourself and have those conversations. Not everyone is confident with that. I think some ways to overcome that fear factor or that mental block, because I used to have it as well, is if you prepare a script. So say you're a tradesman or a tradie and you want to go into a real estate agent to win some work and maybe sign a contract with them, have a pre-prepared script. So you're not just going in there and you're just winging it, because that can go downhill very quickly if you freeze and you don't know what to say. So have a pre-prepared script.
Yep.
I think that helps a lot as well. But in terms of the other ones, they can be a bit capital intensive. So if you're starting out, you may want to stay away from agencies, because even if an agency is charging you $2,000 or $3,000, what you'll find is of that $2,000 or $3,000, there could be a third of that that's being actually used for ads. The other 2/3 is like a management fee. So just be very cautious when signing on with an agency.
Yeah, I would say like the best thing, like if you're in a like a duo like you guys, you can divide and conquer. One does marketing, one does this other thing. It's really interesting what you say about email marketing. I don't have the book here. It's maybe actually it's ironic. I don't film from our home office. I'm in the spare bedroom all the time. But we actually do have a soundproof studio down the hallway. I just never use it. But anyway, down in that room, I've got a book down there. It's called Email Marketing Rules. And it's a book and it's 1,000 pages. It looks like the Bible times 2 with the really thin paper. And it goes through like every single email marketing hack. And basically the reason is that the reason that book exists is because email marketing is the most effective. But you have to have the list, right?
Yeah.
And that's why capturing those emails is so important. And it's actually I think it's a bit of a psychological bias that people go through. And we'll expand on this in our marketing mini-series. But I think when people open their email inbox, they're often, not always, but they're often in there to do business. You're receiving a receipt from somewhere. You're clicking on a sales email. It's a business thing that you're doing. And people are in there ready to do business, so to speak. Whereas if you go on Instagram, it's great to have an Instagram following, as long as Facebook doesn't change all the rules underneath you straight away. But it's great to have a following, but they're not there to purchase all the time. That's why those aren't as effective. And so cultivate that. And I think a lot of businesses, I don't know what you guys see with your tradie clients, but a lot of people think that I don't have like a big strategy or something like this, so I shouldn't even bother. But I feel like it's just such an easy way to capture leads for next time.
Yeah.
So easy.
I think Owen, I think on that as well, like sometimes people just put in a too hard basket for that. It wouldn't work for me. But people don't try sometimes, and they'll just come up with this pre-prepared response to tell themselves it's too hard. So I think it really isn't that hard to capture emails, especially if you're sending out invoices and whatnot, like you email them.
Yeah.
So I don't think just a too hard basket. I just don't think it's good enough in this day and age where everything is online.
Yeah.
Everyone's information is so accessible.
If you think about it, like where do you want your business to be, right? In 5 years. It's probably going to need to have a good digital strategy, even if it's a Sparky business or even if it's a whatever, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, Daniel.
Well, I think you see a lot of sort of, especially tradies, I'm seeing it sort of like I need more customers. And I just think there's very little action being done a lot of the times. I think just saying it or, just putting out some average content and then, boosting it or paying for it, it's not going to bring in the leads. I think going into what Jordan's saying is there's got to be a bit of strategy with it as well. And it's got to be able to sort of capture whoever your customers may be. It's got to be able to capture their attention to get you to click on their stuff as well. It's not just do it for the sake of doing it. Some, iPhone photo with, a quick caption isn't going to get you multiple leads coming through it.
Yeah. I would, just as a general principle here, I would just tell them to have a spreadsheet. Down one side, you've got all the different options that you try. Let's start with like Facebook, Google, TikTok, and then let's have the other things like real estate agents. Let's go with local footy clubs. Let's go with community groups, letterbox drop, and just put everything down the side, and then put how much you actually spent on that, whether it's time or effort, and just put down how long you spent on that. And then in the third column, you'd have what was the return. When someone tells me that they saw me from here, what was the return? If you did that for 6 months, you would quickly realize what's working and what's not. I just think a lot of people, to both your points, just aren't smart enough Well, they're not smart. They just think they're not smart enough to figure that out. But it's actually really simple when you just put it down, something simple like that, and you can see. And it took me years to figure that out, to be honest, guys. Like I had a rough idea, and I just thought if I kept shoveling, I'd be fine. But then I realized, I'm like, holy heck, look how fast our podcasts are growing.
Yeah.
What the hell am I doing over here? Like, go that way. It's telling me to go that way. So we went that way. And then years later, now we're coming back to that other stuff over here, right? Because we can afford to do it at scale.
Yeah,
So that's the difference. Okay, next question comes from, we've got two more left, from Davo, who said, how do I market a services-based business? Well, it's basically the same type of question. As a consulting business, I am a reliability engineer and I want to provide maintenance/reliability engineering services for businesses. I'm just at the beginning, so the cost is very important. It's probably the same type of strategy, would you say?
I would say so, for sure.
Yeah. And
Very similar question.
One of the things, I can't remember who said it, Queenie Town, Invest with Queenie, who said this to me. I think it was either her or a partner, Pablo, said I can't remember the name of it. Maybe you guys know, where an artist used to just go around and go to the 100 most common and most sought after pieces of art, and then copied one thing from each of them, and at the end created their own art. And then that was their strategy. And, they say, what is it? It's the sincerest form of flattery. Or something like that. And basically, that's what you can do. See what everyone else is doing. You don't have to copy exactly what they're doing, but just take the good bits of what they're doing. Like that imitation is so important. That's probably what I did. Because I don't know about you guys. I'm not a reliability engineer, so I don't really know like what the specific industry practices would be, but just look at what everyone else has done and speak to business owners would be the best advice. All right, final question, which was more just a question. I might just generalize this question because there was one sent in at the last minute right before we recorded, and it was more around insurance. And I guess the question was, they were asking about general like insurance at large and workers' compensation. Are you guys happy just to tell us, like, what are the types of insurance that businesses should consider getting? And then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think it really depends on your industry and sort of what type of sort of insurance you need. So I think first thing I'll do is speak to a bit of an insurance broker. They're not expensive. They just pile up a bunch of quotes that tell you what you need and go from there. The question was sort of, I think, regarding having like business insurance and sort of in quotation marks, because it's very a loose term. And then WorkSafe, sort of having a WorkSafe cover. So I think the question is it connected? No, they're not connected. They're two separate things. Workers' compensation more and more is becoming linked to more of a government thing, especially sort of New South Wales have completely moved it to the government. I'm pretty sure Victoria still have a separate organisation. With separate underwriters, but WorkSafe sort of run it, but it's still sort of regulated by the government. They're mandatory for corporations to have. Right, so if you're a company, you actually have to have it. Even if you have sort of business insurance, quotation marks, outside of that, workers' compensation is slightly different. You need it to work together. Do they affect each other? Not from my understanding. I double check that. But from my understanding, they don't affect each other, but you need both. So your business insurance is not workers' compensation insurance.
And I guess some of the, just speaking very generally and broadly, like types of insurances that you can have, it does really depend on what you're doing and what industry you're in. So like Dan said, workers' comp, non-negotiable. And then you've got your own separate business insurance. If you're a professional, you might have your professional indemnity insurance. Public liability is also an essential one. But again, it just varies from state to state and from industry to industry.
I was so confused about this. This is a question from Slippery Possum is the name, which is a good name, by the way. So I was because I'm from Victoria, these guys are from New South Wales, and it's different all over the country. So when we did this lesson, and it's also available in the free course that's in the show notes for the podcast, so it's available there. When I did this lesson, it's really important to know that depending on your state will depend on how you get it. So you need workers' compensation, and typically what it is, it's based on the salaries of your employees, but also your contractors. So
you're deemed employees that are contractors. So it's not like your company contractors that come in. It's contractors that, if you were to step back, not look at the transaction itself. Are they your employees? Yes or no?
The
They
ones you
look
should
like
be paying
employees.
super on.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're the ones that should be on there, not just like a
Blowing.
Yeah.
yes.
Blowing.
Yeah.
So everyone except for the blow-ins. But no, it's true. And then they also ask questions like, do you work in this office with other teams, and how do you do that? Because they really want to know if people are flaunting the rules here, like if they're skirting them. And what you have to do is you have to update that every year. But the way it works from a Victorian's perspective is, for example, you have to apply for the work cover certificate, but then you have to go to Allianz or one of the big insurers who actually do the underwriting. And then that is basically lodged at the work cover. You get your number. So you have your insurance and you have your workers' comp, basically. And then if there are claims, if your team expands, that gets more and more expensive. If you're in a high risk industry, it gets more and more expensive. So think about all those things, but it varies on a state-by-state basis. You can just Google workers' comp.
New South Wales is so streamlined.
Yeah.
So streamlined.
Yeah, it's really easy.
Yeah, see, Victoria was I was really put off by how hard it was to get something that seemed essential for a business. But you have to consider it if you have employees. And to be honest, it's worth it, because if they injure themselves, it's just so worth it. Now, there are other insurances, which Jordan mentioned, that you must have. If you have people on your premises, things like public liability, if there's anyone coming onto your premises, no matter what it is. Professional indemnity, we pay about $70,000 a year in professional indemnity. Which is absolutely positively outrageous.
It's becoming ridiculous, the cost of these insurances, even like back to workers' comp, like they're raising the government is raising that by like 40%. And like so just to give the listeners an idea, it's a percentage of your total wages. And we're seeing some of them now are like 6 or 7% of your total wages, and they're getting even higher than that. So say you have 300,000 in wages. If they continue to raise and go up to 10%, you're paying $30,000 in insurance, in workers' comp. It's just unbelievable. It keeps going up and up.
Yep. And you can see why people are trying to get around the rules, because they're so taxing, so to speak. So, but
not that I know of.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah. So you can see why. So there are some really important insurances that was actually covered in the True Cost of Staff episode, one of our first ones, but it's also in the free course. If you check that out, if you need help, you should speak to what we call like a risk broker or like an insurance broker. They can definitely help you out. Maybe get a few quotes though. That's probably my biggest piece of advice, because you just don't always know. A lot of times they'll work on commission as well. So
so read the measures, because I have to have them in there now.
So those are some good questions. So it sounds like if anyone is out there and they're thinking they want some extra cash during interest rates squeezing on their business or on their full-time career, and they're struggling to make ends meet, consider a side hustle. Take what skills you already have available and look outside of the business and see what you can do. As Marco said, as the fourth co-host of today's show, said, just ask your boss if there's any overtime. It's out there, so just ask them. And there have been some really good ones here. We're going to do a marketing mini series, so be sure to write into us. Send us your questions. There's a link in the podcast player. We haven't been doing as many episodes lately, but we're going to do it. Marco says, haha. There are going to be more episodes of the Australian Business Podcast coming. We'll also be on the road. So come and say g'day to us in Sydney. We'll be there. Hopefully there's can you guys do like a bit of a pop-up banner or have some sort of sign?
We'll get one
that has Grey Space Advisory on it. That'd be a bit of fun as people come into the roundhouse at UNSW. Cool. All right, guys. Well, this has been heaps of fun. Thanks for taking time out of your Friday, and thanks for everyone who tuned in live. Really appreciate it.
Always.